I mean, the man's not wrong. Under different circumstances, Sigvald might have actually enjoyed it. But it's a brave new world, one in which the scion of Slanesh hopes does not end with his cold, lifeless corpse getting golden showered by Throg. Subcommanders returns to the channel with El Clasico, the OG thematics. Order versus Chaos. Skaven and the warriors of the far north against a grand alliance of dwarfs, humans, and elves, replete with steam tanks, dragons, and a whole lot of Daka. And we're gonna see some bananas builds on both sides as the Dragon Princes ride to ruin. Looking like the end times out here. The menace below has risen from the depths, and it's Throg and Skeggi fighting back to back. Two best friends that anybody could have. Sigvald leads the Chaos Warrior infantry, Throg commands the Beasts of Wintertooth and the cavalry, and the Skaven, well, they're just doing Skaven things. It's looking like a World War II flick out here. They've got some serious firepower, warp lightning cannons, deathglow bombardiers, and a whole lot of artillery. But here's the thing. The Empire's pretty damn good at shooting you too. They've got a dwarf phalanx in their front ranks. That's one great way to stem the chaos tide. They've got dragons overhead to cause that terror, to unleash some strawberry milkshake breath and send you into oblivion. They've got Ungrim ready to slay monsters, a steam tank in the back, and they also have quite a lot of Daka. So, Hellstorm rocket batteries are going to open up fire, and for some reason, I don't know why, every time I cast my subs, or my viewers, when they're playing Subcommanders, they love suiciding their Marauder Horsemasters and their Marauder Cav. I think it is a latent hatred of Surtha Ek. That's the only thing I can think of at this point, but it happens every damn time I do it. Look at these poor guys. Just Vanguard deployed right in the fire arc of all these handguns and the arcing artillery. And take a look at that shot. The legions are marching forth under a salvo of rocket fire. Fimir warriors, Chaos warriors, Sigvald, Throg. You know this is going to be an epic game. Warp lightning cannons are going to open up on the Illyrian Reaver archers and the Jezzails. Natty Bubo sharpshooters getting some good shots in too. Already bleeding models left, right, and center. And the Imperial gunpowder will force Chaos into high gear. When they finally get into melee, it will be no mere warrior phalanx, but a shield wall of dwarf ironbreakers. Their armor is thick and their shields broad. Not to mention Dragon Princes patrolling the flanks, gobbling up any warhounds to try to squeegee their way through. Pretty fearsome army, I must say. They are packing some heat. But a pack of doggos managed to slip past, and they're going wild on the Hellstorm rocket battery crew. And they're gonna finish them off. That's a big play. Hellstorms can do some serious work in a 3v3 scenario like this one, so getting them off the field early, pretty big, and they're actually gonna rout before they lose the majority of their models too, so we might see them again. Very nicely played there. Ooh, might have gotten sandwiched. Don't know how many will escape. There's a final transmutation. Overcast going down on Throg. I'd argue that's probably not the best target for that spell right now. He has regen. If you don't have a way to burst him down directly after you cast it, probably just cast it on something else like the Fimir. But then again, that has magic resist. So Balefiend's probably not the right call either. Maybe just wait until a blob forms in this infantry engagement. It'll really help your Ironbreakers tank out for quite a bit longer than they would normally be able to. And they're going to be tanky anyway. I mean, there are no chosen on the field. There's nothing for the infantry on the Chaos side that will chunk through Ironbreakers easily. They do have a lot of armor piercing though, and they do have Forsaken on the flanks. Penumbral Pendulum going down will carve a path to the handguns. Pretty juicy cast from Norska, picking off the back line. Star Dragon beginning to feel the wrath of Warp Lightning, but Deathglow mortars have opened up, and in true Skaven fashion, what could be more thematic than some good old-fashioned not-so-friendly fire? Must have heard Archaon thinks the Great Horned Rat's a joke, get a little bit of payback for their deity, and that volley wasn't even near enemy infantry. Had to be intentional, and it demolished those Chaos Warriors. Puts them in their place with some fireworks. And speaking of fireworks, the Hammer of the Witches wants to get in on the friendly fire action, blow a few Dawi in half, but hey, kill me some Chaos Warriors, so it's all gravy, right? No problem whatsoever. Jezzails continuing to crisscross their fire, destroy the silver bullets in the back, and the Chaos Warriors with great weapons are charging home with their very high charge bonus for infantry. Star Dragon is getting picked apart by the artillery and the Jezzail fire. Ironbreakers unleashing their blasting charges into the front ranks, pushing back the initial wave of Chaos Warriors, but yet another wave are coming in. Crossbows getting some good shots into Throg, and the Ironbreakers layering their defense, but one way to make sure they retreat and push them backwards is to unleash the Death Globe Avalanche Mortars. If I was playing Order here, I'd be focusing them down immediately with the Hammer of the Witches. You cannot afford to let them fire into your stuff. They will explode so much of your infantry. if they're given time to shoot. Sigvald is beginning to feel the effects of all that armor-piercing handgun fire that's arcing his way, and he's now dueling Ungrim Ironfist, which is probably not where he wants to be, and magma spewing forth from the mouth of a moon dragon of Lilith. Oh shit! And it's looking like the Cell games. Final flash from Vegeta. Half of those Forsaken just completely exploded by that cast, and the Chaos Warriors pushing through the miners and the Iron Breakers are trying their best to do so. Breaking this dwarf phalanx will not be easy, but it will be a much more simple task if those armor-sundering Miststalkers can charge it from behind, and they're going to shut down one of the great cannons. Pretty big play. Sigvald is getting low. Chaos Warriors need to pull him away from Ungrim Ironfist, who's showing him no mercy, no respite. Handgun fire doing a good job of stopping the armor-sundering Miststalkers for now, and a Wither. Big AoE spell going to debuff the armor of all the units in the middle. Sigvald needs to run. He is so low, but the Star Dragon, oh my god. That is some Daka if I've ever seen it. Rattling gun, alley-oop to the Warp Lightning Cannons. 6 of them firing in and destroying that poor single entity as Golden Hounds bounces through the center of the Skaven battle line. Sigvald is still alive, and he has retreated. That Auric armor should give him a bunch of regen. That is one thing Chaos has going for them. Their lords all have regen except for Skrulk. So even if they get beat up, if they run away and somehow manage to survive, they might end up being okay. Skaven weapon teams are running into melee. I don't recommend that. That's not really where they want to be. Warp Lightning Cannons continue to reap a terrible toll across the battlefield, and the Moondragon got a little bit too close for comfort against those Skaven weapon teams in the back lines, and she's down to half HP, and she does not have life support from a mage. No regrowth, no Earthbloods will be going her way. Look at all that artillery and magic exploding at once, and the silver bullets are donezo. Another really good cast from that Penumbral Pendulum. Femir Balefiend is definitely making a huge impact. His cousins, though, not having such a good time. They've been ripped apart by all that handgun fire, but with the Werkin, they have bounced back and forth, killing a lot of artillery, so they've still been pretty good. And the Avalanche Mortars are still the biggest threat the forces of order face. Well, those and the Warp Lightning Cannons, who have done an incredible job of sniping out the single entities, and in fact, they just routed the Moondragon. So yeah, they've been amazing. The Skaven artillery has been on fleekazoid this entire battle. Really just destroyed a bunch of the forces of Order's army. Their most important, their highest value targets. Rattling guns firing in, but they're incredibly exposed out here, and they're going to get charged by the Fireborn and Dragon Princes, who have finally decided to make their move. Silverhelm's also roaring in from the flank, and I like that play from the High Elves a lot. I think a lot of newer players will commit their cavalry way too early in these kind of engagements, and in 3v3s, it's very easy for them to just completely focus you down right at the start. Hold on, use them in reserve, wait until the battle lines break down, and then the cavalry can really be brought forth and do a lot of damage to the opposition. So I think that's the right play, but still, he hasn't shut down the artillery, and that's the problem. He's going for the rattling guns instead of going for the really powerful stuff that'll make his Dragon Princes sad. Halberdiers continuing to get exploded by the Deathglow Bombardiers. The Avalanche Mortars are just shrekking stuff at this point. Well over 200 kills, and just going from target to target as Pit of Shades drops down on the Dawi left flank. Didn't seem to clip that many of their units, though. Not going to do a massive amount of damage. Silverhelms are in there, trying to do whatever they can to push back the tides of chaos, and it looks like the infantry fight is going the way of the forces of order. But the artillery fight, yeah, it's going the way of chaos for sure. And if Order doesn't do something about those soon, they're not going to have an army left. The Warp Lightning Cannon's got plenty of ammunition to continue rending apart the infantry that remains, but that is the advantage Order has right now. They have a lot more infantry. A lot more infantry. The Chaos Warriors did not do particularly well in that fight. The Ironbreaker Phalanx has held strong. Their blasting charges really brought those numbers down, made it a much more manageable fight for the forces of Order. And we've got a bolt coming out from the Moondragon and the Princess riding atop it, trying to take out Sigvald, who's got to be close to that regen cap at this point. He's been regenning the entire battle. Werkin taking a full volley of handgun fire. Even with the Ruinous Flesh, he will not enjoy that, and he's trying to escape and get some of that regen. Jezzails and Avalanche Mortars are retreating, doing what they can to escape, and Marauder Horsemen and Marauder Horse Masters charging in and giving them a little bit of a screen but they won't be long for this world, and a bit more friendly fire from Warp Lightning Cannons are going to send them running for the hills too. Look at that blue tide, that Dawi tide, pushing forth. Illyrian Reaver archers working in tandem, tying down a lot of range units in the back, making sure that that inexorable tide of Dawi, that shield wall, continues pushing forward, and they need to get into the artillery. That is their win condition here. The phalanx is held strong, but now they've got to get aggressive, and that's not where the Dawi are really great. It's not really where they shine. Not particularly fast, not particularly mobile, but they can throw blasting charges at Sigvald from close range, and he's going to try to escape and get back to the safety of his own forces. Deathblow bombardiers, the mortars coming in, raining purple death from the skies. The purple haze, it's too much. The Reaver archers are donezo, but there's no infantry left for the forces of chaos. What are they supposed to do? Just throw scraps at them, I guess. There's no other real card to play. The avalanche mortars and the rest of the artillery that isn't shut down can still fire in and do a tremendous amount of damage, but there's nothing in the middle, really. There's a few Fimir warriors and artillery crews that are out of ammo, and that's pretty much all you can use as your meat shields at this point. But it's amazing what those Deathglow mortars have done this battle. They still have Sigvald alive. I think Skrolk is running. Oh, he's still alive. More summons. That's big. That's what Chaos needs. They need more summons. They need more bodies on the field to just push back the horde of Dawi that are trying to get into the artillery. But Chaos is pretty much off the field. There's not a whole lot left. Ungrim is on the hunt, chasing after Skrolk, who's popped his Rod of Corruption. And the Dragon Prince is coming in from the flank. Will bowl over the meat shields, get rid of these clan rats pretty quick. Skrolk is about to shatter for sure. He's one hit from death. Warp Lightning Cannons are back online and killing a bunch of Dragon Princes, though. Warp Lightning Cannons have been incredible, too. The Werekin, the Skin Wolves, and the rest of the Beasts of Wintertooth, even Throg, on life support. But they're going in. Throg and Skeggi fighting back-to-back. Can they hold? Bounce bar a little bit in favor of the forces of order. If they could get rid of that princess, though. Get rid of this Moondragon. That would be a huge win and a big swing on the balance bar. Get rid of one of their only remaining sources of terror besides the steam tank. Ungrim and Sigvald going at it. Sliver Slash and the Axe of Dargo. That is a big mohawk and a big donger. And it looks like Sigvald is actually winning. Ungrim choosing to run away. Very dishonorable. Stand and fight, coward. This is, I mean, it's a win-win either way. Either you die and gain a glorious death, or you win and kill off the most important Chaos Legendary Lord on the field right now. Moondragon Breath will lower Sigvald's HP even more. Ungrim should have stayed and fought, man. That's his lore. You gotta roleplay, bro. Chaos Warriors fighting it out with a bunch of Iron Breakers. I don't see them having the DPS to cut through all the... Yeah, they just broke immediately. Chaos is done with this fight, man. They're over it. They've had enough. And it's up to the Skaven at this point. Do the Skaven have what it takes to carry this game? It's still doable. There's not a lot on either side. Some kind of spell, some kind of vortex on the Ironbreaker Blob would be huge. Jezzails are in melee, but they're out of ammunition. So they've got to use their shields just to bash some miners over the head. Do some 360 no-scopes at close range. But yeah, they can't hold on that side either. The Moondragon's still alive, but that volley might be enough to send her off the field. Nani Bubo's fired in. She is running. Crossbows are shooting. Warp Lightnings are still firing. They've been firing this entire battle. I don't know. I think the High Elves had enough cavalry advantage to push in and get rid of some of those about halfway through this battle, but they weren't able to do it. Nani Bubo still has a ton of ammo. Firing into the crossbows, probably the right call at this point. I mean, I'd like to see them kill a steam tank, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to get in range, so might as well kill a thing that's the biggest threat to you. And they're getting some real nice Zergriz Red Tiger no-scopes. Those are a lot of heads flying. A lot of dead in that crossbow unit. Oh, that's brutal. That is so brutal. They're called sharpshooters for a reason. Warp Lightning Cannon finally looks to be getting shut down by Balthazar Gelt, of all people, on his winged Pegasus. Bit redundant. I don't care. It sounds cool. And he's going to kill off the rest of this artillery crew. And I don't think the Skaven... Oh, well, that's one way to kill him. That might be one way to stop him. You get point-blank volleys from the other cannon crew. Quicksilver is displeased with that, I'm sure. And this wave of Gromrel the Ironbreaker squads have been fighting on the front ranks this entire battle, rallying to their king, rallying to Ungrim Ironfist, the king of Karakadrin, the Slayer God, and together they will ride his lofty mohawk to victory. And they're gonna carry it. Dawi put in so much work and finally killed off the Warp Lightning Cannons and carried the game. Flick Montana with the Gromril Wave, Spooks on the Imperial Gunpowder, the Senate, I am the Senate, with the High Elves, Rat Smacker with Chaos, and he got smacked by the rats. Maybe should have picked a different name so he didn't get friendly fired by the Avalanche Mortars. Professor Holzkopf on Norska, and Danger Ice on the Skaven. Really fun Subcommanders battle. Got pretty close at the end, but the Imperial Gunpowder in combination with the Dragons up top, which to be fair, the Dragons actually didn't do a massive amount. The Cavalry got some good charges in, did some good killing, but made a few mistakes there. I think he would have been better served going for the artillery for sure. Getting rid of those Warp Lightning Cannons who fired the majority of that battle. Skaven, look at those Avalanche Mortars. The Death Globe Mortars, the Warp Lightning Cannons, all of them shoved, all of them killing a tremendous amount of the Order forces. Wow, that's some serious killing power for sure. But then Professor Holzkopf, his cavalry tried to do some stuff. The Werkin, Fimir, got some good kills on the Werkin and on the Miststalkers and Throg himself. Spooks, Balthazar Gelt, 50 kills. Steam Tank, 56 kills. And then for Chaos and Sigvald, well, the Chaos Warriors did not do as well as I would like to see them do. And I think that was probably the biggest issue with their build. Maybe a few less Forsaken who really didn't do anything and got mismicroed a bit. Perhaps a couple Chosen. Great weapons would have been enough to cut through the Gromril Wave and finish them off for good. And if you get through the Ironbreakers, you get into the artillery, you can win the game. You can ride that to victory for sure. But super enjoyable. Thank you guys for sending in that Subcommanders battle. Had a great time casting it, had a great time watching it. And there will be plenty more content on the way soon. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to give it a rating. And I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys. From across the great ocean, they came on white sails. Galleons filled with powder, guns, and the will to tame a prehistoric jungle. Welcome to Lustria, gentlemen. Enjoy your stay. It's one of the most ancient civilizations on the planet. For the privateers and conquistadores who joined up in search of gold and glory, it's a whole new world. The boys are back in town. Kataf's legendary Southern Realms and Dogs of War mod has made its return to Total War Warhammer 3 with looted tanks and an unlikely cast of colorful mercenaries ready to get rich or die trying. Believe me, Lizardmen have no problems obliging them. Gonna be one of, if not the biggest battles we've played on this game. There are more than 10,000 troops on the field, and it's Subcommanders, which means each player is in control of a specific element of the army, be that ranged, monsters, mobility, or infantry. We're also playing with Duke's Dang Nations, man. Those Dang Nations, so hot right now. Literally scared to say the right name in the beginning of the video because I've gotten a bunch of content demonetized recently for like super mundane language. So for now, we'll call it those Dang Nations Overhaul mod. Thanks, YouTube, and let's go over armies. What is that thing? We have an unidentified floating object in the AO, so we're gonna need a confirmation on what are those? Those are the Renaissance men El Cadavo, Marco Colombo, and Ugaletti's floating ordnance tortoise tank, powered by the looted core of a solar engine. For the colonizers, the West End Company, Skeggi, and New World colonies are teaming up with some bizarre contraptions, including small little stegodons with cannons on top. Beasts of Tashnar are a bit bigger, and Lost Erickson is back from the grave, alongside Rico's Republican Guard, and a host of pikemen, which, by the way, are really good. So if you're wondering how the Dogs of War like to play, think of them as a combination of Renaissance Italy, Spanish conquistadores, tercios, pikemen, sword and buckler infantry, Pavese crossbowmen, and the bizarre inventions of one Leonardo de Miragliano. But yeah, lots of pikes and gunpowder, supplemented by the Norskins of Skeggi, who have a combined roster of Lizardmen thralls and their own explorers. As for El Cadavo, the disgraced, greedy, and perhaps rather foolish former Prince of Telea, it's all about that bread, and he has no qualms with sacrificing the lives of his men to get it. In the lore, he has a bit of a rivalry with Lord Mazda Mundi, who had to wake from his slumber 3 times and destroy his colonies each of those times they were rebuilt, before a decisive battle finally sent the entire expedition to an early grave with a ruination of cities, for the cherry on top. On the other side, defending their home turf, are the Wood Elves. I guess Sisters of Twilight showed up to the party, and they're next to Temple Guard that are freaking ginormous. Look at the size of those chunguses. They're basically monstrous infantry in this mod. I really like it, actually. From a visual perspective, they are a lot more intimidating, and the whole thing about Saurus is they never stop growing. So if you take Ancient Temple Guard, they probably would be pretty close to that size. Nystra and Arahan, perhaps noticing a disturbance in the weave, have traveled a long way to help out, aboard their forest dragons Seth and Har. Expect their twin talent bows of Dusk and Dawn to sing deadly dirges this day, and for the Toad Man himself, well, he's just tired of being woken up by this idiot. Time to put him in the dirt for good. Mazdamundi is in charge of the foot troops, Sisters are in charge of the ranged elements, and a Saurus Old Blood on a Carnosaur will be controlling the cavalry alongside an Engine of the Gods with a host of Horned Ones and packs of Deinonychus. And take a look at that size difference between the Star Chamber Guardians and those Glade Guard. They're huge. So, because the New World colonies have artillery and taken up a very defensible position near the Temple of Huanchi, Lizardmen and Wood Elves will be forced into an uphill battle to remove them forcibly. Their one clear advantage here is in the magic department. I don't believe Marco Colombo or El Cadavo have any mages in their employ, but of course Mazdamundi would be able to outstrip them in terms of talent anyway. Mobility game may also slightly favor Lizardmen here, though that Raptor Cav moving out to take an early fight on the flanks, but that pike wall, the infantry fight, is going to be really tough for the Lizardmen. Tank shot just got reflected up top. I'm not sure how that happened, if there's some kind of missile mirror Mazdamundi put down on his infantry. That was wild. I don't really have a good way to replay that. But the Saurus Spears are charging into melee now, and things are about to pop off for both sides. Otho's unlucky organ gun crew, the Slayer Artillerists, making their presence known, while the Beasts of Tashnar are looking especially beastly this day, charging through the center while Pavis crossbowmen whittle away at some of the unshielded infantry up front. This is pretty much just a sacrificial wave here, testing those defenses, probing them, seeing what's up. I wouldn't expect these first swords to survive for too long. They will need magical support to get through all these pikes and berserker infantry from Skeggi as those Pavis crossbowmen pull back. Now, one important element of spellcasting in Duke's mod is that spells take a lot longer to wind up, like 3 to 6 full seconds longer. So while they can be utterly devastating, you have a lot more time for counterplay and to get the hell out of dodge. A lot of interesting developments over on the flank. Raptor Cav moving in, Pterodons from Skeggi, and Exon Hounds moving around behind to get a hammer and anvil off on those Raptors. In the center, Bubble of Note from Mazdamundi to help keep the Saurus online a little bit longer. Glade Guard shooting in with Starfire Shafts and Poison Hagbane tips. Temple Guard, Star Chamber Guardians, and Mazda himself are nearby. One Temple Guard just taken out by a cannon up top and dropping some kind of spell in the background there, looking like a Comet of Cassandora directly on, you guessed it, Otho's unlucky organ gun crew. They don't have that name for no reason. They're about to get deleted. They have nowhere to go. Explode! Oh my god, one of those guys just went flying off the top of the screen. Good night. It looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again. Paymaster Wagon directly behind it, noping on out of there, and Temple Guard in the center, channeling their inner Dwayne Gorak Johnson. They're like double the size of any of those infantry. Totally natty, bro. Chicken and broccoli, that's it. That's all they have. Eat Plen, trend hard, Anavar give up, demolish your goals. You know the drill. They're gonna rip those Skeggi Marauders a new one, but if you notice, a lot of them are using Lizardmen gear. Looted McQueedles and stuff. Pretty cool touch. Remember, Skeggi is a combined and unique roster with Norskin and Lizardmen elements, utilizing some of the local fauna. Pikemen are holding out on the left flank in the forest against a horde of Wood Elf infantry that are coming out now. One of the rules we typically like to play with in Subcommanders is that everyone brings at least some fodder infantry so that no one's only using single entities and stuff that kind of makes the battle dull. You want to have some chaff infantry so there's always something to kill, always something to throw into the meat grinder in the front ranks, and give each army a little bit more beef so we get those body counts, like over 10,000 like in this one. Big cav fight on this side between Skeggi and the Cold One Riders of the Lizardmen, protected by their Saurus Old Blood in the center, munching on everything. Exon Hounds got their full surround off, but is that going to be enough here? There's all kinds of Raptor Cav streaming down from the forest above. They just crossed over the ridgeline, and I'm frankly not sure how well the Hounds are going to do face frontally against all those clever girls. Hawk Riders coming in from the flanks. I'm not sure that's a melee or a ranged variant. Looks like they do have... Oh my god, what just happened to Rico's Republican Guard? That is a big loss for the Dogs of War. That is a famous and renowned pike regiment that just got deleted from the game because of ruination of cities, and they definitely had all kinds of time to maneuver out of the way. Just didn't notice it because of the scale of this battlefield. I don't blame them. Hammer of Dawn called in from Victor Hoffman. Gears of War style. Gonna delete some infantry here too while the skin cohort try to push through. Now, this is what the Lizardmen and Wood Elves need. They are vastly outnumbered in terms of foot troops, in terms of infantry. They do need big time spellcast to equalize those numbers somewhat. But I'm sad that that happened to Rico's Republican Guard of all the regiments. It's like the coolest infantry unit the Dogs of War have on their side of the field. Skin Wolves with a full surround off on the Raptor Cavalry, but I think with the Saurus Old Blood there, Lizardmen are going to look pretty strong. I'm not sure Skeggi should have taken a straight up fight against all those Cav out there. There's a lot, but the elite halberds in the center should be able to hold back these Temple Guard, and even though they're essentially like monstrous infantry, they are low in number, and they do have very big hitboxes, so in terms of firing them down with gunpowder troops or hitting them with halberds, getting a lot of troops into base contact, that should not be too hard, especially if the organ guns are firing in from above. I guess their whole crew wasn't straight up taken off the battlefield. Lost about half from that Comet of Casimdora. Curse of the Midnight Wind to anchor the left flank of the Lizardmen. Star Chamber Guardians trying to push their way through the Black Watch, the elite Estalian knightly aristocracy. They're holding on quite well for the moment, and actually, Star Chamber Guardians are trying to force path their way through. Might be taking more damage there than they should. Bubble of Nope ward save 22% to help them out. And it seems like Mazdamundi has that off cooldown a lot. It's like a shorter cooldown than it is in the base game. Pikemen are straight up butchering the low armor infantry of the Wood Elves here. They're anchoring on left flank exceptionally well. Seth Har and the sisters, Nystra and Arahan, will try to turn the tide here. But they can't really get good breath attacks into the middle of the forest, ironically enough. And I think the Pikes are going to be able to hold out really well on that side. I think the Dogs of War and the Southern Realms in general are holding that hilltop quite admirably for the moment. Question I have right now for the defenders is, how are they going to perform once this side inevitably crumbles? It looks like Skeggi got mopped up over here. They did not invest all their units over into that engagement, but there was a lot of them. There were Skin Wolves and there were other mobile elements that they're now not going to have protecting their back line. So once the Lizardmen Cav start sweeping in from the rear, how are things going to go? Because that hilltop will not be safe anymore once the Old Blood shows up to the party. That weird tank, Ugaletti's floating ordnance, the Tortoise tank, an unidentified, or rather, I guess, identified floating object is moving closer now to provide overwatch fire. It seems like it fires solar engine beams out of its cannon portholes. I don't know how good it is. I don't know if it's done anything this game. I guess we'll find out once the battle is over, right? Big focus fire coming in from the Wood Elves, but range fire in general in Duke's mod is not as oppressive. Even with focus fire from a bunch of units, you're not going to straight up terminate troops. It's a lot more of a support element, of a suppressive element, and dealing damage over time, rather than saying, oh, I see a giant there, oh, now it's dead. Which, frankly, is not my favorite part of vanilla anyway. Another thing I'm kind of worried about for the New World colonies is that their pike line on their right side, on the right side of that hill, was kind of extended really far out. And now that the Lizardmen Cav have won their engagement, they're going to start sweeping in from behind, they might be able to get in behind those pikes while the Ancient Stegodon and its solar engine bust through the center. Looks like the Feral Carnosaur from Skeggi has made its way back and will look for a duel, but the Old Blood and the rest of his Horned Ones have just shown up as well. And the Dogs of War are quickly going to have to make a makeshift defense and shift some of their pike line back to help deal with all those monsters now pushing in from the rear. A couple of those pikes did real well, maybe too well. They pushed all the way onto the Lizardman side of the field and are chasing units off the map. They need to get back here. Vespero's Vendetta, the duelists from the Dogs of War list, fighting in there alongside some trolls from Skeggi. Another solar engine. I keep saying It's not a solar engine, dude. It's an engine of the gods coming in with the Hammer of Dawn. And here come the Raptor Cav. Horde ones in the rear. There are some Pikes getting ready to receive them, and they're just about able to plug that gap. Horde ones are fast, man. Holy crap. The Cold One Spear Riders are 78 speed, but the Horde ones are 100 speed. So they're able to just Sonic the Hedgehog their way around the side, get in behind. But there are a lot of spears moving to the top of the hill now, and the Pavis Crossbowmen might be safe for the moment. Half Pikes in the center being netted in place, and I think that's just for the debuff, because none of Amantok has a melee defense debuff now. Base weapon damage debuff as well. And a banishment to help clear out some of these militia spearmen. Skink cohort should be able to overwhelm them momentarily. A little bit of friendly fire from Mazda though. Seth and Har moving back to support. Remember, they can switch between the Talon of Dawn and the Talon of Dusk. One for bonus first large, one for spread shot, clearing out infantry. Ugaletti's floating ordnance charging into melee. It's done nothing from range. It has 6 kills. I'm about to projectile vomit. That is disgustingly bad. What is wrong with this thing? It is some seriously untested technology, and it is not making good account of itself. I don't know. I don't know if that's Duke's fault, or if it's just a weird unit, or just being used wrong, or what the hell is happening, but it's doing really, really, really bad. Hopefully it'll be tanky, I guess, and allow the Devil Carrier that's tagging off the cannon up top to fire in and start racking up some big-time kills. That ward save from Mazda Mundi, I've seriously seen that like 6 times already. We're 8 minutes in. So yeah, it must be a shorter cooldown. That's crazy. The Pikes so far have been by far the most impressive elements of this Dogs of War army, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of mid-tier and elite-tier Pikes and Halberds from the Talayan and Stallions, Border Princes, Dogs of War in general. The Feral Carnosaur has been picked off by the Troglodyte and Old Blood combo. Otho's unlucky organ gun crew about to finish off the Star Chamber Guardians, and a point-blank volley from the handguns. Executed at close range. Impressive stuff. Temple Guard gone from this world, and Lost Erickson fleeing from Seth and Har. He's got about half HP. I believe all the main characters for the New World colonies and such are still alive, but they're all looking a little bit worse for the wear. Now they've got to contend with an Old Blood and a bunch of scary-ass dinos. One thing I do want you guys to keep in mind is that this is not Kataf's original version for the Southern Realms, of course. This is a sub-mod using Duke's Damnations as well. So do remember that the way some of these units are going to interact and their stats, this is going to be Duke's take on an already awesome mod. It isn't necessarily Kataf's original version. So just keep that at the back of your mind as we go through. Perhaps that's why we've seen that floating ordnance tank not do a whole lot, because of the changes made. Might be some things that have been overlooked in the shifting with the submods and what have you. Or maybe it's just a trash unit, I don't know. I have been kind of disappointed. I really wanted to see that thing pop off. It has not thus far, but it is still alive. We just saw El Cadavo route from the Forest Dragon. Not sure if we'll see him return or not. The Pikes are continuing their butchery of this Wood Elf Infantry Skin Cohort source. Anything that charges directly into them has been scythed to pieces. Engine of the Gods for the 3rd time this battle. And this one, the Pikes are going to push forward into the enemy infantry, dodging the worst of its effects. And El Cadavo has fallen, and he can't get up. Mazda Mundi missing out on his chance to send him to an early grave with an earthquake. Seth and Har and his sisters, Nystra and Arhan, finishing him off instead. Viking Berserkers charging from the hilltop alongside the armored trolls, finishing off the source and protecting the remnants of those Slayer cannon crews. I think the artillery is actually still online. They could get back on and continue firing. And that small Steganov cannon up top still alive as well. I do not think that Ugaletti's floating ordnance UFO will be around for much longer. Only 627 HP. And now has to contend with an Engine of the Gods Stegadon, Mazda Mundi, and a Feral Troglodon. The Troglodons in this mod, they only fire on the charge. So they're a lot like the Soul Grinder for Khorne. Basically a precursor weapon. They can't sit back and shoot like artillery or like normal range troops. They have to charge in while they're firing. The hilltop has still not been taken. Not yet anyway. The Old Blood got real low. I believe the Carabiners, the mounted cavalry for the New World colonies and West End Company, have been firing in and whittling him down. So a couple more volleys could finish off the Old Blood, and that could be a huge swing in the Dogs of War's favor. But they're having some issues with line of sight at the crest of this hill. They need to get their light cav away, turn all their guns on the dino, and finish it off for good. Because one thing that Mazda Mundi can be doing this game is he's got Apotheosis, so little minor heals. Healing has been nerfed substantially in Duke's Damnations, but it can still be impactful. It'll still add up over time, and it's just enough burst healing to keep your single entities alive. So gotta make sure you bring it down with the gunpowder. We'll see if they're able to do it. Don't think killing the Forest Dragon or Mazda Mundi anytime soon will be in the cards, but the thing with the Lizardmen here is they are running out of bodies. They do not have a lot of infantry left, and soon their single entities are going to have to start dealing with pretty healthy pikes. Marco Colombo straight up Jurassic Parking it away from the Old Blood. T-Rex hot on his heels. Do not get in the porta potty. You will not survive. Oh no, single entities pushing. CA, please. That's all on CA. Fix that stuff, dude. It's so bad. It's the same thing for the flying single entities as well. They just can't land, and then they just push the foot troops around instead of attacking. Just attack things, man. Whatever. Anyway, Pavis crossbowmen and handguns at the apex of that hill finally overrun. Remnants of these Temple Guard, only 283 HP left. But how many? It's 5 or 6 models taking on Vespero's Vendetta, who only have 14 models. They do have bonus versus infantry. Let's see who wins this one. This is an interesting fight right here. Piles of corpses, I would imagine, due to the armored trolls and because of Vespero's Vendetta. Shouting about Sigmar for God knows whatever reason. Engine of the Gods right above them. Troglodon there too, and it might be a terror out the dinos park on over. Temple Guard managed to win. Yeah, and it looks like the Dogs of War infantry on that side are beginning to back off. Engine of the Gods, almost no HP remaining, but Apotheosis sent its way, and the heals, the spells from Mazda Mundi are gonna start paying huge dividends here in the late game. There's not a whole lot of infantry left for the Dogs of War either, but I am seeing pikes. I am seeing multiple regiments making their way back towards these single entities. And if they can just finish off any of these dinos, it'll be a huge swing in their favor. But the heals might be able to keep the dinos topped off just enough. Another Nun of Ammontok for the speed debuff, the melee defense debuff, and the base weapon damage minus 20%. Those pikes are going to be overrun by a swarm of skink cohort out of nowhere. And if I am the Dogs of War here, the West End Company, New World Colonies, I am retreating all of my pikes and all of my units back to that hilltop and consolidating my forces. Because spread out right now, they're going to be easy prey for all these dinos, charging in from multiple flanks, terror-routing them, and dealing with all these remnants, these stragglers of Wood Elf and Lizardmen infantry. But if they can box up once again and present that united, powerful pike wall, they might be able to push back these tides of dinosaurs and carry the day. Carabiners have not been able to kill off that Old Blood, but we can see all the single entities except for Mazda Mundi are dropping very low. A couple more armor-piercing volleys from close range might be able to take out the Carnosaur. Be a huge swing for them. Has not happened yet. Pikes are leading the charge here, and it looks like they're beginning to consolidate their forces, deal with the dinosaurs, and protect their artillery piece, which is still alive. But we got a barn burner on our hands, folks. We are going to go right down to the wire. Just remnants of pike formations and some missile cavalry remaining for the Dogs of War side. Lizardmen and Wood Elf side, it's pretty much going to come down to the single entities. They don't really have infantry, don't really have cavalry, and they don't really have anything but really depleted big scary monsters, which to be fair are just about the best thing you could ask for when it comes to a late game situation, especially if you can keep tossing heals their way. Dude, that's brutal. They need a Knights and Carmine duelist or something that can just strike that killing blow. Now, one of the things about Duke's mod is that legendary lords and characters like that Old Blood don't have crazy amounts of HP. They attack really fast and hit really hard, but they can kill each other in seconds if you're not paying attention. So just like one more good volley, I feel like would be enough to put that Old Blood in the dirt. But I've been saying that for the last 5 minutes, and it still has not died, and Mazdamundi is a big part of that with his Apotheosis heals. Handguns, overrun, overwhelmed by the Skin cohort at the top of this hill. They will be silenced for good, and the Conquistadores finished off. No mercy, no respite, no hope, and you can just see the Temple of Huanchi littered with the dying and the dead. This has been a crazy battle. Easily over 8,000 kills already to this point. And it looks like the Lizardmen and Wood Elves are consolidating whatever small forces they have. Still, the Dogs of War are in this game. They've still got a decent amount of pikes. And if any of those monsters dive in, they will not perform well against a row of serrated, pointy objects that are 15 feet long. The Sarissas could cause some serious carnage. Dinosaur on the Skeggi side is still alive as well. Don't believe it has any ammunition left for its cannon. I don't like how these pikes are overextending, though. They need to hold that hill. You're not going to catch anything here anyway. I'm not sure why they're so far out. They need to box up, force those single entities into melee with the Carabiners. Oh, that's a disaster. What's going on right now? They're completely overextending, and the light cavalry just routed off by the dinos. That's painful. Those pikes have performed so well. Well, they don't need to go all Macedonian and Epirus here, get all advancing in the face of the Roman cohorts. They need to stay still, hold back, and present a united front. And now that the nets are coming out, that's going to slow them down. Oh, interesting. So none of Amatoc doesn't pin you in place now. It's just a big time slow. And a debuff, of course, which we've been talking about earlier. The pikes are going to kill the remnants of all this Wood Elf and Lizardman infantry. They're doing fantastic. I mean, these guys they have almost 300 kills. That's insane. But they're really far forward now. And getting back to deal with the Troglodon and deal with Seth and Heart of the Forest Dragon, I'm not sure they're going to be able to make that journey before all the other pikes are dead. I guess we'll see here. There's a lot of terror routing in the background there. And I think the single entities for the Lizardman side, the defenders of Lustria, may have just cracked a nut. And I'm not sure it was entirely of their own making. I think there might have been a little bit of throwing here on the Dogs of War side, who played so well for so long. And then when it mattered most, they kind of just overextended and left their back line exposed. I could be misjudging the situation. There may be some element to aggressive pike play that I'm not quite understanding, but I think they should have all united and grabbed that hill, and then the single entities would be forced to charge in, especially because this is not a competitive battle. Nice breath attack. So perfect. Must coming in from the Forest Giant there. Skeggi infantry is coming back to support, so it might not be completely over yet. They're rallying a bit, but they have to contend with these really powerful single entities that have just been causing all kinds of terror, and I don't think they have a lot of sources of ITP. But once that dinosaur dies in the background, the Devil Gun for Skeggi, it might be over for the Dogs of War. What I mean by not competitive battle, of course, is that it's kind of seen as a little bit gross if you're just gonna keep cycle charging over and over and over again with your single entities, which maybe there's been a little bit too much of that here in the end game, but at the same time, I wouldn't expect them to just stay in melee with pikes either. And the pikes didn't do themselves any favors in that they didn't form up into a terrace into a big square and defend that hilltop. So yeah, really fun game, man. That was awesome. Single entities are going to carry it. It'll be a mass rout. Balance bar shifting all the way in favor of the Lustrians. And awesome stuff from everybody there. The Duke, Orion's Hope, Alan B. Alan B, of course, Last Defenders on the Raptor Cav. Orion's Hope on the missiles for the Heralds of Ariel. And the Duke, the main modder himself, on the Lizardmen infantry. And then for the West End Company, Dagon, Pajad on Skeggi, and Bagel of War, New World Colonies. And I think Mazdamundi has to take MVP there. Temple Guard with 2,000 damage value, that's insane. But yeah, Mazda with over 200 kills, almost 3,000 damage value, and some big time ruination of cities. Not to mention the Apotheosis heals in the late game, which kept the Old Blood alive when the Carabiners were trying desperately to kill it. I really think the Dogs of War could have benefited from having a single entity duelist that could have brought down some of those characters, because the Troglodon, the Carnosaur, even the Sisters of Twilight got really low. And I believe that they have access to different knightly orders. I think there's a Knights in Carmine duelist, maybe a Knight of Myrmidia, a couple other ones like that I've seen deal crazy burst damage to characters like Throughout the Unclean, and you'll see some of that in replays coming up here soon. And I think that might have been enough. If that Old Blood drops a little bit earlier, I think that maybe even just straight up changes the game. I also do not think that Skeggi should have taken the straight up cav fight out there on the flank without support from anything else. There were some Black Watch and a few elite halberds there, but they're just too slow to really do a good job of reinforcing. And I think if they play more defensive there with their monsters and don't lose all their skin wolves and Exon hounds at the start and kind of defend from that hilltop and then range out in little sorties, do a little bit of skirmishing here and there, get a little picks here and there, wait for things to develop a little bit more, that could have been a different battle as well. But overall, I think the Dogs of War played well. I think that they had some really nice pike play throughout. And ultimately, I think that spellcasting was the difference in this battle. Mazdamundi was the game changer, as well he should be. Very fitting that he's the one who puts El Cadavo and his armies away. And super fun, thematic, Subcommanders, well played to all players. I'll see you all in the next one. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Apocalypse and the return of Subcommanders on Steel Faith Overhaul. Here, in the shadow of the pyramids, the undead minions of Nagash have risen from their crypts to face down the last alliance of elves, and the fate of the planet hangs in the balance. And this is Subcommanders, which means each of the 6 players on the field today will be controlling a section and particular unit archetype of a cohesive army whole alongside their teammates. And Tyrion, King Cucker of Ulthuan, has some avenging to do on behalf of his daughter Aliathra, while Orion, the living avatar of Kurnus, leads his wild hunt alongside his high elf cousins. And even the Dark Elves are here, with Crone Hellebron and a Khainite warhost baying for blood. However, the Undead Alliance have answered the call, and the Lieutenant of Nagash himself, the Mortarch of Sacrament, Arkin the Black, has risen, alongside Manfred von Dustein, Harbinger of the Apocalypse, the Mortarch of Night, and Count Noctilus. Had he survived Dreadfleet, might have taken Luther Harkin's place as Mortarch of the Abyss. This is a 3v3 team battle. Spankies commands Dark Elves, leading the infantry with Hellebron at the helm, while Skull Hunters will command the High Elves, with Star Dragons and Cavalry under his wing, and I control the Wood Elves, with a host of Glade Guard, Deepwood Scouts, and Way Watchers, providing some long-range punching power with Hawk Riders in support. And for the Undead Alliance of Nagash, Logan and the Dreadfleet command the monstrous units with Rotting Prometheans, Deck Droppers, and Animated Hulks, while Tim and the Tomb Kings provide the range firepower and artillery with Bone Giants, Ushabti, and Casket of Souls. Gilgamesh is the infantry with ranks of Graveguard, Cairn Race, and Skeletons, and through it all, prowl the Necrophax Colossus, raining death from above. The table has been set. Now let us begin. So, the point of Subcommanders is that each player commands a small subsection of an entire army. So teamwork, communication, and moving as a cohesive whole are going to be really important, or you can quickly get overwhelmed, isolated, and destroyed. But each player was allowed a handful of supplementary units outside their role just to help protect their investment in whatever their core role was. So I have a couple Wild Riders, High Elves have a couple Bolt Throwers, the Undead have some hero choices and casters just to help round out their builds. And that means that teamwork is going to be incredibly important here, because if my Knife-Ear cousins don't watch my back, all I have is archers pretty much. That can turn pretty disastrous pretty quickly, as you might imagine, and same thing for the Tomb Kings. Their Bone Giants might be able to protect themselves, but Ushabti Great Bows and their backline will be very susceptible to cavalry charges if they do not work together as a team. But this whole thing can make for some really dynamic and interesting battles, not to mention cinematic, when we've got 6 massive armies clashing together. And we are on Steel Faith Overhaul, so this baby is already turned up to 11 with over-the-top action. And that is how we're going to get things started, with the Casket of Souls ramming down into the Ice Blades, and a Sorceress unleashing a Fireball towards the Undead lines. And the Ushabti will be on the receiving end of that as the Bone Giants return fire, and we've got an artillery duel early on. The Bolt Throwers will definitely want to go for the Ushabti Great Bows or the Bone Giants, while the Casket of Souls will want to rain down on the Dark Elf Infantry. Those Black Guard, Executioners, and Sisters of Slaughter will all be very good choices, and Way Watcher Fire arcing out on the left flank will be how this battle commences. Now you might be wondering, why would the Vampire Coast not be playing the ranged role here? Well, we tried that once before, with the Zombie Pirates doing just that, and it was incredibly OP. Like, everything was dead before the other team even got into melee. When you can field like 12 handgunners and all those awesome meat shields and deck gunners and deck droppers and queen bats and all that with constructs and those really good meat shields in support, you can basically just go AFK and win, and it's impossible to crack. So we felt like switching the roles up would be good in terms of having more fun here. And as the armies close in for the kill, fire and magical energy crackling across the battlefield. We've got a lot of aggression being put out on the left flank of the Elven Alliance as a Banshee and her Blood Dragon warriors charge in and collapse into the Ice Blades with Cairn Race in support. So Manfred on Overwatch will help support that, while in the center, Sisters of Slaughter going right into the teeth of the Vampire Coast Assault, Vampire Counts Assault, and Flaming Sword of Ruin will help them carve through the center there. But 3 units might have a hard time holding all those warriors and Graveguard at bay. But getting a little bit blobby there, and it might be time for a Dark Elf Sorceress to unleash a Flamestorm in the center of it all, and a huge fiery tornado arcing through and carving a path, racking up a ton of kills on Graveguard right there. And as the deck droppers close in as well, it looks like it'll veer off a bit, but those things, especially when overcast, will last for upwards of a minute. So that Vortex might not be done. That fight in the center for the Dark Elves, it's going to be rough, but the Wood Elves getting a lot of ranged firepower, and alongside Orion's arcing spears, carving through the Graveguard here, and Weight Watchers and Starfire Shafts will carve them up and make sure those Graveguard on the left flank die very quickly. More Graveguard Great Weapons pushing forward now. They don't have that Missile Black chance, so the Weight Watchers will really be able to rack up a ton of kills on them. And you can see the Flamestorm still going right now as the Star Dragon flies overhead. Maybe looking to line up a Breath Attack. Casket of Soul still raining down that are magical artillery in the back lines, and Silver Helms and a Star Dragon getting committed alongside that Terrorgeist. A big fight, and Manfred, pretty low right now, will look to escape, get away from that pretty hellish situation. But I told you that Cyclone might not be done, and it's found another mark, and a glorious one at that. Spooky Scaries immolated in a towering inferno, and there will be no escape as an entire unit of archers evaporates while the bolt throwers continue pounding into the Tomb King's constructs. It is bedlam, absolute madness in the deserts of Nahakara. Dark Elves holding surprisingly well given how massively outnumbered they were in the center, and Tyrion has ridden to their aid as the sisters begin to waver and break, and the deck droppers and Graveguard out on the right flank of the Elven Alliance being picked apart by a storm of arrows just blotting out the sun, and they're falling. They're dropping like flies, and those are some really accurate, pinpoint accurate shots, getting kind of pin cushioning those deck droppers in the air. And so without support from the crabs yet, they're probably going to crumble pretty quick, and more fire arcing into them. And a lot of that aerial superiority is disappearing for the Vampire Coast. Wood Elf Archers definitely making a big impact here, but the Dark Elf Infantry right now has been the MVP. I mean, they're holding very, very well in the center in a really tough situation. Now the elites are getting committed. Manfred did manage to survive out on the left flank. I'm not sure what the hell that Vortex is doing. That's a pit of shades going down, and it is going to completely whiff everything. But Tyrion is in his element, supporting those Sisters of Slaughter. He will be able to carve through the Graveguard chaff, and they will fall like wheat before the scythe. Sunfang gonna slice through them pretty easily. Tyrion is a combat god in SFO and incredibly mobile to boot. He is no joke whatsoever. A lot of archers still not really shut down at all. There haven't been a lot of things that got into the back line, but the Tomb Blade of Arkan will summon a unit of skeletons, and Fate of Buna will target those Blades of the Blood Queen, as Hellebron's personal executioners get the focus from the forces of Nagash, and you really don't want to be in the sights of Noctilus Prime or the Dreadnoughts of the Dead. That 4-barreled cannon can make you hurt, and they'll be blown apart under a withering salvo of artillery fire. A brutal sacrifice to the Lord of Murder. But while the Wood Elf Archers are kind of fine in the back, so are the Ushabti Great Bows and all the Tomb King's artillery. Both sides haven't been able to shut down the back line. The Defender of Ulthuan, a bastion in a storm of madness here. Maelstrom has been unleashed. The Wrath of Aminar made manifest, and under that vortex, the center will finally buckle and collapse as the undead pour through the gaps and those tornadoes rip through their lines, ripping Dark Elf ladies limb from limb. Only Tyrion is going to survive that onslaught, and that is not going to be in multiplayer in the final release, but it was used here and used to great effect. Way Watchers and Deepwood Scouts still doing their stuff as the animated Hulks, the Undead Ogres. Our first look at the monsters from the Mountains of Morn making it in, but they're a little bit krakeny, tentacly, octopusy, and they're coming forward now, charging towards the archers, and they're going to get destroyed under some withering salvos of skirmish fire, armor-piercing missiles, and over here, Manfred von Karstein, not a lot of health left, but with the Terrorgeist, they might be able to take down that Star Dragon, although I think Manfred von Dustein might want to run away. Wind of Death, not the best one ever, but that was a super nice Casket of Souls onto the Black Guard of Nagaron, and they got shredded, and it looks like the Dark Elf Infantry is mostly on its last legs as those vortexes continue to arc through the battlefield. I imagine some friendly fire went down as well. But the Wood Elves and the Wild Riders still in there, and now Orion has been committed to the fight, and the Hunters of Orion, the Hunters of the Avatar of Karnas, charging forward now. Those Wild Riders do have a bonus versus large when they have shields, so they're going to rip through those animated hulks, and those monsters were not that well supported, so they went down pretty quick. Lord of Life Mage and Hellebron fighting Noctlist, and looks like Hellebron has just routed as more fireballs arc throughout the battlefield, and Ushabti summon on top of the Sisters of Slaughter, and the Bolt Thrower crew out here fireborn in their element, destroying skeleton horse archers, and the Bolt Thrower crew are still around for now. But this is where things get very scary for both sides. When the battle lines break down, when a lot of the infantry and cavalry are gone, a lot of the range units are left, and it's who can compromise the back lines. And right now, the vampire counts are doing it with the Blood Dragon Warriors, who are super fast. And look at that stat line. That is terrifying. You do not want them getting into melee with your Weight Watchers, your Deepwood Scouts. They can rip you up pretty bad. So something will have to be done about those Wild Riders getting a beautiful charge into the Skeletons and Graveguard out on this flank. And they've got a lot of room to maneuver and a lot of room to capitalize on that insane speed they have in SFO as the Terrorgeist plummets to the earth. Starfire shafts taking it out, blood spattering the desert sands, and the archers have been compromised, but Orion, King in the Woods, coming in from the flank, and goodbye, ripping them in half with the Spear of Karnas, and he's not done. Blood Dragon Warriors are killing his archers. He's not a fan of that. How about we throw a spear at point blank range? What is cooler and more Warhammery than that? Perfect. Impaling him into the desert, and that Blood Dragon Warrior is gone too, and quickly they will start to crumble as Orion beats the ever-living crap out of them. Hawk Riders on Overwatch now, supporting very nicely, and Fireborn managing to get into the back lines of these Tomb King Ushabti Great Bows, starting to shut down those constructs, and the Flyers gooning on top of that Dreadnought. And the Necrophax Colossus will soon collapse as the Star Dragon does have flaming attacks. It'll die very quickly. Hawk Riders supporting as well. Manfred, not a lot of health left on him. Still flying overhead on that Zombie Dragon. The Dreadnought's trying to escape, but it won't. Manfred's probably crumbling right there. He is crumbling. He has almost no health left whatsoever. And you know what? That's a fitting way for him to die, right? Doing absolutely nothing before he plummets to the earth. It's nice to see that Manfred, who caused the end times, will get an ending like that when we rework the end times here, and Tyrion chasing down Ark in the Black, the Mortarch of Sacrament trying to escape, but he is also crumbling, and one hit from death, and there are no lords in the game that Tyrion can dumpster quicker than Tomb King's lords, and Arkin beheaded. And in quick succession, all the undead lords of Nehekara, of the Tomb Kings, of Vampire Council, Vampire Coast, are falling, and Nagash's lieutenants are not having a good time. Those deaths will swing the balance of power a little bit in the Elven Alliance's favor, but the Crabs are getting in now. They were supporting with their blunderbuss shots out on the flank, and they were doing quite a bit of damage, but now in melee is where they really shine, and those running Prometheans, the Crab people, will start taking over and destroying the Wood Elf archers on this side. But a lot of them have used all their ammunition, which means you can commit them to melee, and it's not really going to be a big deal. Sure, Weight Watchers are not going to do well here. They're going to get bisected by those huge rending claws, but at the end of the day, they shot all their ammo, so they did what they were supposed to do. And with the Hawk Riders getting some more shots in, those Crabs are not having the best time ever. I believe the Hawk Riders have like 130 missile damage or so in SFO, so quite a bit more impactful from range in Steel Faith Overhaul, and they are starting to crumble as well. Weight Watchers holding very nicely. They have very high melee defense, low armor, not truly incredible melee stats. They're still kind of squishy, low HP and all that. but for an archer unit, they can defend themselves. And when these guys were already kind of starting to crumble and getting a lot of range firepower poured into them, with Star Dragons coming in from the flank and Sunfang ripping in from the other side, it will not be a good day for the rotting Prometheans. And the crabs are dead. Balance bar swings entirely in the Elven Alliance's favor, and there is almost nothing left for the lieutenants of Nagash. A casket of souls and some Graveguard crumbling far in the distance. That will pretty much be it for the undead here. And I must say, if you can get a battle like this organized, Subcommanders is just incredibly fun. Without question, you will find some really OP combinations if you play long enough. Because I mean, think about it. The synergy between races can equal more than just the sum of their parts, right? And the Vampire Coast has a ton of Vampire Counts infantry with shields like Graveguard, very cheap, cost efficient, good for killing infantry. To body block for them and grind down an enemy, and then you mass really cheap handgunners and cannons behind that. There are very few races that can withstand that kind of firepower. Empire, another fantastic faction for Subcommanders, same with the Dwarfs. Overwhelming firepower from long range when they're able to just invest all their funds into steam tanks and gunpowder units, and it completely changes how you play the game and adds this really nice communication and teamwork dynamic that isn't always present in Total War. If you've never gotten a chance to play Subcommanders before, I highly recommend it. Not very easy to organize, but when you can, it's a ton of fun, and I will definitely be looking to do some more of that soon. Like I said, we did do one other, but this was by far the better of the two. The other one was one of the stompiest games I've ever seen in my life. Complete Elven massacre, and not very tactically interesting, because I'm not kidding. I think you can leave Fire Will on and just go AFK if you play Vampire Coast with all range and Subcommanders, and you have decent teammates. It's just completely brutal as hell. But the Dark Elves here, infantry-wise, did very well. Managed to tie down a lot of the stuff in the center, and the High Elves, their cavalry, had a bit of a rough time with the Star Dragons. Kicked ass. Tyrion kicked ass, and the Dark Elf Sorceress got a ton of kills. Noctilus, Casket of Souls, and a lot of the monsters, infantry and monsters for the Vampire Coast had some issues here. But, I mean, they supported decently well, at least out on the flanks. Terror guys tried to help out Manfred against Star Dragons, which is not an easy fight at all. And just an absolutely brutal battle from start to finish. And this is what I love about Subcommanders, is you get to see these really cool thematic lore alliances and then use them as part of a cohesive army. So seeing Wood Elf archers working alongside Dark Elf infantry and High Elf cavalry and dragons is just like so incredibly cinematic and fluffy. It gets my Warhammer lore boner popping off real nice. So yeah, it was a super fun game. I want to thank all these guys for coming out and helping to play with me. Again, not the easiest things to organize ever, but I do them when I can, when we can get this many people in. It's super fun, and I believe SFO will be unleashing its new patch on Saturday. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you guys enjoyed the game, and I'll see you all in the next video. Andy Pratt, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys. Magic? In Warhammer 3? Never heard of her. Got something way cooler for you nerds today. Welcome to the Great Mortis Delta outside Xandri, near the Fleet Port of Terror. Got another Subcommanders here as the forces of chaos and destruction team up to devastate the forces of order. Well, that's the game plan anyway. The monsters of Moulder, the heavy metal of the Dark Gods, and the ranged firepower of the Dark Elves, squaring off against the shield walls of the Dawi, the bows of Athel Loren, and the majestic charges of Bretonia. These plains of bone are running red with the blood of the damned, and soon it will mingle with the blood of the dying. 6,000 troops on the field. It's a big one, and most of them will be expiring by the time this video is over. So, leading the forces of order, the Duke commands the knightly orders of Albrecht de Bordelot, with an air force of Pegasi, questing, and Grail Knights waiting on the wings. Atlas 99 is in charge of the elite dwarf phalanx, a bunch of hammers, slayers, and ironbreakers, forming the bulk of their killing power in melee, and Boki has control over the Wargrove of Woe, led by Drycha the Briar Maven, with an army comprised almost entirely of archers, ranging from Glade Guard to Way Watchers, taking the strengths of each faction and pushing them to the limit. In this one, holding the line are the armored, stunty little Grudge Gnomes, led by Ungrim Ironfist. Providing fire support for them are the accurate and armor-piercing archers of the Wood Elves and Bretonia, defending the flanks and the skies above. Tough nut to crack for sure. But across the weeping rivers of blood march the armies of chaos, with Clan Moulder holding down the right flank. So, monster theme, of course. Morskitter's Hellion, a Packmaster on a Brood Horror, Gorich, the Castellan of Hellpit, and naturally, Throt the Unclean himself. Backed up by Rat Ogre squads and Wolf Rats with the Thing Hellpit Abomination, there should be plenty of meaty morsels to feast upon this battle. For Bagel of War and the Army of Chaos, Archaon the Everchosen and a small squad of Chaos Knights provide some close support to the Moulder Menagerie, but the bulk of their force is made up of infantry, including warriors and chosen. Last but not least, we have Unstoppable, with the core of Shades, Dark Shards, and Reaper Bolt Throwers, led by Malekith the Witch King on Seraphon, and Doomfire Warlocks. Now, usually in Subcommanders, somebody has the artillery, and full armies dedicated to cross-map explosions are especially devastating in team battle scenarios like this one, because you have more players and more units to defend them, so it's a lot easier to keep them online and firing. If you've got like 8 Hellblaster volley guns or Hellstorm rocket batteries, you have a way easier time protecting your flanks because your army is 3 people combined and it's spread from one side of the map to the other. This particular battle, though, neither side really has the benefit of artillery. Reaper Bolt Throwers are not an artillery piece that puts a lot of pressure on enemy forces, so the approach will be somewhat peaceful, which doesn't really make the Marauders feel any better about what's going on. Anything that enters the cone of fire of Waywatchers, Deepwood Scouts, and Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts will be feeling it in the morning for sure, but most of the armies on both sides will be relatively unscathed by the time melee is joined. Malekith on Seraphon, waiting to pop some Soul Stealers on the blobs that will inevitably develop as this battle progresses, and Moulder moving up on the right flank, while on the left, Marauders with great weapons being torn asunder by all that focus fire. Now, I'd argue in a 3v3 scenario, you really want to be saving all of your volleys for the high value targets because there are a lot of them in team battles, and you can make it a lot easier for your squad simply by picking and choosing your targets wisely, keeping mobile and sniping out dragons, monsters, chosen, and other expensive creatures. But it's maybe not the worst thing in the world to expend a couple rounds of ammunition clearing out the chaff and making it easier for your front line to break through. In the background there, Slave Rats just evaporated to an Ironbreaker Blasting Charge volley. That was quite smexual. And you can see Moulder's putting a lot of pressure on the Dwarf left flank, ready to overload that with the help of Archaon and his Chaos Knights. So Bretonnia and the Dwarfs in particular going to have to put a lot of their forces over on that side to slow down the momentum, because if Seraphon joins the party, particularly with all that terror and all that mobility, it's going to be very hard to hold back the tides. Ironbreaker volley coming in right up the center. Get another look at that explosive action, just absolutely destroying an entire unit of Skaven slaves, which, maybe you don't want your blasting charges killing slaves either, but chaff's important to clear out the field too, and there's no quicker way to do it. It's what blasting charges are there for. Slayers into melee with Marauders. They're probably not going to stick in there for too long. Get some good damage on the flank, then retreat and hold on to those, because you'll need them against that Moulder Menagerie. Menagerie. Whatever. I say Menagerie just because it sounds fancier. I like saying it more. It's more fun. Big charge coming in from the Knights of Bretonnia. Knights of the Realm up the center into the Skaven slaves, but Throt the Unclean and his Brood Horror squad are right there. Gorich, the Castellan of Hellpit, looking like a Terminator in the background, spewing alchemical warp flame out the back of his jetpack. And he's into melee, ripping and tearing and rending with those iron claws. And the Skaven Brew popped on the Packmaster, but Knights of the Realm will be intelligent here and choose to disengage. Bonus vs. Large Knights are quite good against Rat Ogres and Brood Horrors. Knights of the Realm will actually do well in those kind of engagements unless there's 4 or 5 single entities charging in there as well. And at that point, Knights of the Realm simply don't have the DPS to deal with all that simultaneously. So they will disengage. If they get a 1v1 with any of those monsters or with the Rat Ogres, they are sure to stick in there. Chaos Knights moving in. There's a nice ambush from the Knights of Bretonnia, but this time it's just mounted yeomen, and so that simply cannot go well for them against Archaon and Chaos Knights. Cascading Fire Cloak will make that even more lopsided, and with all that armor, they won't even take damage against the low weapon strength of those mounted peasants. Gorich, looking like Cabal from Mortal Kombat out there, got the spins, working that pull. He's a cyclone of armor-piercing death, while Malekith unleashes his own dark magic version, Blade Wind, slicing through a horde of hammerers and slayers, cutting them to ribbons. Some nice Dawi filet on the menu, and definitely going in the book, Rat Ogre Monstrous Infantry, melted to the Knights of the Realm out on this side. hitting the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep quite hard as well. Knights are holding their own for now, but there's simply too much on this side. I'm going to be able to hold them back for much longer, and honestly, most of the Knights should probably retreat at this point and just head somewhere else because they don't have enough support out there. Beautiful Blade Wind from the Eternity King, and setting up another Penumbral Pendulum from Drycha, the Briar Maven of Woe. Didn't make a large impact on those Chosen, who are working their way through some Longbeards, Ironbreakers, and Dwarf Warriors at the moment. More Knights aboard low, waiting out on this flank, but there's a lot of Dread Spears and Infantry stuffing up their charges, as well as some Moulder Wolf Rats waiting on the wings, so they probably can't go in right away, need to wait for a little bit more of an opening before they can choose to plunge into the fray. Gorich and the Morskitter's Hellion fighting back-to-back alongside Throughout the Unclean. They've got all the support they need. Questing Knights are going in, but at this point, it's throwing good money after bad. They'll be overwhelmed quickly with Packmaster charging in from the flank, and Chaos Knights getting a rear charge as well. Yeah, that's brutal. So the Knights out on that side, most of them were not high tier. It was some Knights of the Realm. It was one Questing Knight, but most of it just mounted Yeomen. So not as much investment there from the Forces of Order as the Forces of Chaos have put in. But that means that that entire flank will open up and might give them an avenue of attack into the rear. On the front lines, Chosen will take quite a long time to cut their way through Ironbreakers. That's why Drycha is providing her magical support. Penumbral Pendulums will hopefully push back the tides there, but so far, we have not seen those wind spells do an insane amount of damage, and this one wasn't really any different. Focus Fire from the Wood Elves hasn't really come into play, and they have not been able to break the Dark Elf left flank. The Moulder monsters, and particularly the Wolf Rats, have just kind of been waiting in reserve, waiting for an opportunity to countercharge and tie down some of these Knights, but now the Shades are exposed, and the Moulder Wolf Rats are pulling away. They say, screw it, man. I don't actually want to fight Knights Errant or Knights of the Fleur-de-Lis. They're leaving, and that will leave these Shades in a pretty isolated position that will allow the Knights to get some great value as they charge in and start killing some expensive archers. Same thing's happening over on this side, though. As soon as those battle lines start breaking down, it starts getting ugly for both sides, and a Rat Ogre summon from Throughout the Unclean. The Beast Pack summoned into battle, getting rid of some Deepwood Scouts and Glade Guard over there. Malekith with another Blade Wind. This time, the Dwarfs and Bretonnia are able to scatter. If he had waited a little bit longer, might have been able to get a nasty one on top of the Wood Elf archers, but you can see why he doesn't want to get that close. Focus Fire on any single entity. No matter how much armor you have, no matter how much HP you have, simply won't do well when Way Watchers are focusing you down. Dwarf Infantry is holding pretty admirably in the center. They push back quite a few of the Chaos Warriors and drop many of the Chosen low. But like I said, this side of the battlefield is opening up now for the Moulder mobility and those Chaos Knights from Archaon. Malekith dropping a Soul Stealer in the center to turn that fight even more in his favor. Had 54 kills before that cast. That will quickly raise up to around 70 or so. And now he's going after Drycha, the Briar Maven. Doesn't want to stay in there for too long, I don't think, because with a Rouse to Wrath Dryad summon and some Focus Fire from the Glade Guard, that should be able to push him back. But still, got an attack in and made her think twice about getting aggressive. Pegasus Knights have been held in reserve for a while here, but now that the battle lines are beginning to break down, there should be openings to get rid of these Dark Shards and Shades. And the Wood Elf archers need to make their way back towards the middle of this battlefield because there are so many juicy targets for them to shoot at. Imagine if the Pegasus Knights, who have a full surround off on Malekith and Seraphon right now, if Way Watchers were able to fire in there too, while he's tied down and unable to move. It's essentially a net. Foe Seeker and Heroic Killing Blow popped on Albrecht de Bordelot. Chaos Knights surrounding him, even a Packmaster in there. He's doing a great job pushing them back almost single-handedly while his Paladin is getting gooned out by the Brood Horrors and by Morskitter's Hellion. The infantry probably won't last very long here. A lot of terror on that side, and the Thing Hell Pit Abomination, the A-Bomb, held in reserve up until this point, now marching forward, looking for something juicy to smack around. Anything large would be his ideal target, but his terror and his high stats, and the fact that he can rampage and get even more steroids pumped into his abnormal frame, there's a lot that could be done with him. But this is where the Wood Elves make their money, man. Morskitter's Hellion, the Mutant Rat Ogre, charging forward alongside the Moulder Menagerie, and guess what's gonna happen? A lot of focus fire coming their way, and these are all squishy, single entity monsters that rely on their regen. They cannot survive burst damage particularly well. Not when Waywatchers and Starfire shafts, all this flaming damage that counters the regen. It's nasty. Already, Mutant Rat Ogre breaks off, and he might die to that focus fire. Some of the Brood Horrors and Gorsh, the Castellan of Hellpit, did manage to make it in. But there's just so many archers back here. The single entities, they don't have enough bodies back there to tie all the archers down, and they're getting punished heavily for it. Burning Head going down while Chosen, Slayers, and Longbeards fight to the death. That'll open up an opportunity for the Thing Hellpit Abomination to bound in. And with a rear charge into the Hagbane tip Glade Riders, well, this is the target he wants to be attacking for sure. Abomination indeed, wearing the crown for the most hideous unit in all of Mortal Empires. Probably sharing that crown with the Bloated Corpse from the Vampire Coast. And turning the tides of battle right now as he bounds in. Corrosive Bile being spewed forth from the Packmaster's Brood Horror and the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep, trying their best to prevent these Glade Guard from firing in and further wrecking Throt the Unclean's regenerating monsters with all that flaming damage. Another point-blank volley from the Waywatchers, getting Throt the Unclean up to the point where he's routing, being chased by Albrecht de Bordelot and Mounted Yeoman. Big slam coming in from the Thing, trying desperately to push through all of this infantry, and Gorsh, the Castellan of Hellpit, and a Paladin dueling, but he's dead. The Castellan falls, and he is out of the picture. Doombolt raining down from above, narrowly missing Albrecht de Bordelot, and a Pit of Shades on top of the Chosen and the remnants of this Dawi infantry. I don't know where Ungrim Ironfist is. He may have already fulfilled his Slayer Oath. And that's just making it even easier for the Doomfire Warlocks, Slaane's Harvesters, and these Chaos Knights to pick and choose their engagements here. They're low, but the Knights of the Realm are even lower, and they'll probably be buried by that Hell Pit Abomination as it charges forth. Packmaster routing off towards the edge of the map. You can see Morskitter's Hellion also returned. We'll move the camera out that way and see what's going on. Big charge coming in from Mutant Rat Ogre on top of some Men-at-Arms Spearmen. Oh, it's a sumo slam. By God, they all broke it in half. Morskitter's Hellion unleashing the Warpstone Vortex that he has as his passive, and indeed, even though these peasants fancy themselves as Grail companions and like to fight as such, they didn't hold out for very long once the terror-causing monster made his way into melee with them. Malekith is looking real healthy right now. Still don't see Ungrim anywhere. I imagine he's dead. Albrecht's routing with a sliver of HP left and no Lore of Life to bring him back up to full. Well, the Hellpit Abomination now has some Eternal Guard to contend with. 55 kills now, and even more coming his way. But he is surrounded by AP bonus for large spears, so it'll take a lot of damage in this fight, and it'll get even worse for the Abomination if the Glade Guard and Waywatchers can turn their attention towards him. Warpstone Drill as his tongue, rending and tearing flesh. But Malekith, Throt the Unclean, and the Packmaster are coming back. HPA needs to get moving. Here comes the focus fire. And that bloated, distended form does not hold up well. And there are that many archers turning their attention towards him. So he will retreat, and if he gets too low, perhaps that'll trigger his too horrible to die. We got a duel back here. Mutant Rat Ogre and Albrecht de Bordelot. And I think Albrecht's gonna win that convincingly. 230 HP versus 7 HP. And somehow, Morskitter's Hellion will survive to see another day. Albrecht rots off as well. So the two Brood Horrors, using their regen and their impressive speed, 90 plus, to close the gap and chase him off the map. Banspar is heavily in favor now with the Forces of Chaos, and with his Slaane's Harvesters into melee, using their blasts of Eldritch Energy to deal with the Light Cav and the remainder of this skirmish contingent. That will be your battle. Forces of Chaos managed to clutch that one out, and a pretty close one. Another fun Subcommanders. And I think I did my job there, but I didn't quite have the feast I wanted to. I must say, Boki did a really good job of, once I rolled up that flank and started getting into the rear, he dealt a split with all his ranged troops quite admirably. got some really good shots in on my single entity monsters and quickly eliminated many of them from the battlefield. Kept Throt the Unclean, the Packmaster, and Gorich moving and killed off quite a few of them. Managed to get over 1,600 damage value on one of my Moulder Wolf Rats, and the Helping Abomination got 1,500. It's certainly not bad there, but they did a pretty decent job of countering me. And I will say, I think for Bagel of War, there's maybe a little bit too much invested in the Chaos Knights. It's cool to have one or two things outside your typical purview, just for that extra variety, but I think having 2 Chaos Knights there did break open that our right flank, their left flank, a little bit too hard, and especially when the dwarfs are fully committed to infantry and didn't bring anything outside of their archetype, that perhaps made it a little bit more lopsided than it should have been. It was a close one, and they did a really good job countering it, but the Chaos Knights supporting my Moulder monsters out there really did open up the battlefield for us. So playing that back again, I would say Archaon needs to drop Burning Head, because he was not supposed to be a caster that game. Maybe giving, like, just cascading Fire Cloak is fine, but I think having damage spells there is a little bit too much. We usually agree to 1 caster per team, and Malekith was our caster, and then probably drop a Chaos Knight there too. The flip side to that argument, though, is that the Wood Elves are substantially better from a skirmish perspective than the Dark Elves are. When you bring a full stack of Weight Watchers and armor-piercing cheap archers, that's going to be way more impactful than what the Shades or the Dark Shards can do, simply because they're so far outranged. And so Unstoppable, who got a ton of kills on Malekith and his Doomfire Warlocks, wasn't really able to trade in a skirmish duel with the 180 range that Wood Elves have base. So maybe that's the flip side to that argument, that Wood Elves are able to use their specific, the thing that they're best at doing, while the Dark Elves weren't really. So I don't know, it goes both ways, but yeah, I think maybe dropping one of those Chaos Knights, dropping Archaon and his damage spells, would have probably made that a little bit more fair. The front line for Chaos was beastly. Chosen, just all over 150 kills, just killing the game. And Bretonnia needed to use their Cav a little bit more in reserve, probably be a bit more patient on the mobility side, because he could have gotten some really good fights in with the Moulder monsters. He got some great charges in anyway, but he didn't really have the support he needed over on that side, and there wasn't going to be any more support forthcoming because it was just dwarf infantry out there that don't have the speed to catch up. Slayers weren't really able to close the gap on the 95 speed of Brood Horrors and Rat Ogres and stuff, so it was hard for him. If those Cav don't die so early, I think they have a chance of winning this one. In places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells, far over lonely mountain cold, stir bitter rivals, new and old. Subcommanders returns to Warhammer 3, and the forces of chaos are leading the charge. Princes of pleasure, pain, and plague have brought ruination to this realm, heralding an age of eternal war. The forces of order have not been idle, nor indecisive. The Empire, dwarfs, Bretonnians, and Undead have dug in to staunch this new dark tide. Why vampire counts, you ask? Because they felt like playing it, I guess. But in truth, the Undead have more common cause with the living, the dwarfs, Empire, and Bretonnians, than they do with demons from the ether. And they might just be the difference makers in this 4v4 for the fate of my ass. If you have not seen Subcommanders before, shame on you. You're missing out. There are a bunch of incredible ones on my channel already, but today there's a new one to add to the pile, and how it works is each and every one of the 8 living players in this lobby is tasked with controlling a specific element of a cohesive army whole. So, in the case of the Order races, Gojira and the Dwarfs of Barak Var are the infantry, Romulan Dog is the gunpowder and artillery for the Empire, the Fappening and Bretonnia are the Cav, and the Vampire Counts are the monsters and monstrous infantry. All 4 players on each side have to use communication, teamwork, and good old-fashioned micro to cover each other's weaknesses and make the entire army run like a well-oiled machine, or they will die, with the major caveat being each player has to take a few regular infantry units, otherwise there just won't be enough bodies on the field, and the compositions would be a bit whack from a viewer's perspective. We don't want a big single entity blob going on for half the battle. So, for the Alliance of Chaos, Scorpion controls the infantry of Khorne, Wicked commands the filthy Ratman artillery and war machines, Aerocrastic leads the monsters of Torox, the Brass Bulls, Brayherd, and your boy, Indie Pride, brings the party in his pants. Azazel, Prince of Damnation, and a host of cavalry and fast movers. Huge jacked man, gearing up to reprise his role as Wolverine in Deadpool 3, sharpening those filthy claws, and a bunch of drugged up, sycophantic serpent snatchers ready to run down the flanks. The table has been set. Now let us begin. And it's going to be kind of an awkward start for both teams, because it really isn't clear which side has the artillery advantage. Oftentimes you just gotta settle in to see if you're taking the pounding or if they are, or if it's kind of an even trade. And both armies have an element that really wants to get up close and personal, and an element of their army that kind of wants to sit back and shoot. So ironing out those differences, sending your troops where they will perform best, without leaving your teammates isolated, it's a big part of what makes this game mode, and team battles in general, so interesting. It can zap cannon on the receiving end of some day-ruining rocket volleys, and it's really not amazing in the counter battery department either. So almost immediately, Chaos will begin their advance because they feel like, hey, maybe not winning that artillery fight at the moment. Khorne will be first into the fray as expected, leading the charge with Chosen, the Hellforged host, and a Herald on his Heli Davidson, while Wicked and his Avalanche mortars and Plague Claw catapults provide some support from above. Gotta watch that friendly fire though. It's all fun and games when Skaven slaves are concerned, but if you chunk Chosen, it's a different ballgame. You call names and it ain't just rapping. Bloodletters are getting pounded by those Hellblaster volley guns in the center, and the Undead are about to jump into the mix as well. On the west side, Torox the Brass Bull and the Minibus diving into the fray, engaging the Dwarf front line. Expect those low tier units to fall like wheat before the scythe, and in the center, Khorne's advance is already making headway. Evil Knievel spin cycles from the Blood Shrine, and a bunch of Khornate warriors and Minotaurs eager for the glory that comes from leading the van. Honestly, Blood God should be super happy with this start right now. Essentially has two of his own champions first into the breach, and they should be able to make a wide one for the rest of the army, and Slaanesh likes that. The Hellblaster volley gun for the Empire has been an MVP so far, already taken down more than half the HP of those Hellforged hosts. But if I'm the Empire here, I think I want to get rid of those Avalanche mortars, which are maybe the biggest threat on the Chaos side, at least for the moment. Of course, the Chosen and a lot of these elite Khornate warriors have already bust their way through, buzzsawed their way past the initial ranks of spearmen into the second ranks of miners, but important developments are brewing on the flanks. Slaanesh is linking up with the Beastmen, Heartseekers, Fiends, and the rest of Light Cav, looking to go around, but the Forces of Order are super ready for it. Questing Knights, Slayers, Crypt Horrors, and whatever else might be hiding in the woods may force the Dark Prince to rethink any early aggression. Vlad is in the middle. Warp Flame and Ratlings burninating men-at-arms near the edges of the battlefield. Demonettes and Marauders are waiting in reserve as a second wave. There is a lot going on right now. Avalanche mortars continue to reap a terrible toll. Handgunners getting some really good volleys into the Chosen of Khorne, who have a full surround off on Boris Todbringer and his Griffin. Not really where they want to be, just exposing themselves to a lot of focus fire from the Free Company militia and the grenade launchers. We're getting some good shots into the infantry blobs. Demonettes now engaging. They will not get a full flank, but it's not going to matter because those claws should have no problem bisecting, bullying those poor poopy peasants. But behind it, Khorne Marauders, cultists are brawling in the middle, and they have not been dealt with yet. Maybe the biggest twist in Warhammer history is Skaven have mostly avoided exploding their allies, because I think they know what would happen if they were killing Khorne Chosen offhand. It's way too early to make any value judgments on how things are progressing thus far, although this should be interesting here. Blood Knights with the Hammer and Anvil. Khorne Halberds holding back 4 or 5 units alone. Probably not going to last for too much longer now they've been charged in the rear. But as more and more lesser demons are summoned by cultists elsewhere, Azazel's making his way over to the left flank of Chaos, and he has a spell in his toolkit that could punish this pretty heavily. And he gets to friendly fire his Chaos God rival in Khorne at the same time. It's a win-win scenario, baby. Brutal slicing shards. Not overcast, though. Could have potentially one-shot everything in that radius. Invocation of Nahek will heal at least the undead troops in the mix, and perhaps Chaos will look to see a little bit of ground there because they haven't been able to push through thus far. Grail Guardians moving into the center to engage Demonettes, Warp Lightning, and a Doomsphere from Ikit Claw, causing a little bit of mayhem and carnage. Dwarf Warriors pushed really far forward. Warp Flame and that Bloodletter summon should be able to handle them quite easily. These Minotaurs do not have shields, so if handguns get some good volleys into them, it could be pretty nasty. And a net of Ammontok on the Bloodbrute Behemoth Gorgon with Slayers nearby, and Gotrek as well. And now the Silver Bullets and the rest of this handgun line have turned their attention. Shem's Burning Gaze from the Light Wizard, and the Bloodbrute already down to half HP. Nice little wombo combo there. Getting rid of some of these expensive single entities early would be huge for the Forces of Order. You don't want to have to deal with that thing in a late game scenario with Boris Todbringer and his Griffin. Warp Flame getting some decent shots into the Crypt Horrors. Slaanesh Soulgrinder playing its hand, and now the Dark Prince's Cavalry is beginning to make its move. Blood Knights evaporated after that Slicing Shards and an engagement with the Hellstriders. A couple shots from the Avalanche Mortar makes things pretty easy, and the Elite Vampire Cavalry not going to be able to make a big impact here. They'll crumble out without doing much of anything. It's been a cinematic, blood-soaked affair, and we're only about 4 minutes in. Artillery on both sides have definitely done their job. Avalanche Mortar might be damage value MVP across both armies, but we'll see if the Empire is able to shut it down before it's fired all of its ammo. Beastmen are backing up on this side. They've actually been beaten back by the Slayers and by that net of Ammontok combo, especially with Bretonia sitting on the wings with Questing Knights and the Knights of the Lionhearted. Herald of Khorne getting his ass beat by the Rapunce and Paladin combo. Demonettes crumbling out, but they did finish off some handguns or Free Company militia at least. Boris Todbringer made sure they were sent back screaming into the void, and Azazel is beginning to make some plays over on this side. After that Slicing Shards, he said he wants to taste melee combat, so ensuring some of these men-at-arms don't return to the mix, certainly not a bad idea. We'll see if that opens things up for Slaanesh, which is actually rotating its cavalry all the way from the Chaos right flank to the other side of the battlefield, and this is a play that not too many factions in the game can make. To make a rotation that quickly, it's actually going to put an immense amount of pressure on the Forces of Order, because now they have to respond with everything, and they might leave some gaps, some openings where there wouldn't have otherwise been. You can see all that pink massing on the horizon, and that's a flank overload that could expose the Empire in quite a damaging way if Rapunce and her Knights don't respond in time. It looks like they're charging into the center for their share of the glory, but that's of course putting them in the cone of fire of those ridiculous Avalanche Mortars and Rattling Guns. Regrowth on Rapunce to get her back into fighting shape. Slaanesh has gathered all their forces under Azazel, and they've made a big pick here. Grail Guardians, isolated and pinned in place by Narcissism, will allow that Soul Grinder to gorge upon their essence, while Razorgore Herd from Aerocrastic are massing on the flanks and waiting for a good opportunity to strike. Expect to see much of the mobility for the Chaos side dive into the Imperial rear and start trying to shut down the artillery and the ranged play. But Slaanesh isn't the only faction looking to play to their strengths. In the middle, Rapunce and her Knights have been completely stymied by yet another Brass Orb and that suppressive fire from Ikit's Rattling Guns. And Vlad von Karstein is absolutely styling on some Khorne Chosen and showing them what a Blood Drinker truly looks like. I think we can call it for those Grail Guardians. Even if they weren't netted in place, they would not be able to escape from Slaaneshi Light Cav. And Sweet Sorrow is going to activate for the entire Chaos army, which is extremely powerful. That means the entire army has just been made fresh. Any fatigue debuffs they might have had are gone now. That is a potential huge swing, but it might be a necessary one for Chaos, because even though they've been winning plenty of these individual engagements, and they're just now about to expose the entire Order's flank and rear, it looks like the artillery for the Empire has done even more damage than the Avalanche Mortars have, and in fact the backline for Chaos has kind of been swarmed by a tide of Purple Dwarf Warriors from Barak Var. Torox the Brass Bull and his Minotaurs are still alive. I have seen no evidence of the Gorgon still around. It might have been sniped out. Razorgore Herd are finally being committed, and it looks like a lot of these range troops for the Empire are about to be in serious trouble. Big time net of Ammontok from the Light Wizard, but will only shut down the Slaaneshi aggression for the moment. They don't have enough range troops back here, or enough cavalry from Bretonia to fully cover their exposed flank. Another Narcissism on the grenade launchers, and it's just a full-on terror rout. And this is a huge attack from the Dark Prince, and it might just be one that breaks the back of the forces of order. Azazel's just straight up flexing his grace and beauty. He's an angel of death, and this is why playing the outskirts of a fight, particularly in 4v4s and team battles, can be so important if you're in control of the cav. It can be tempting to commit all your fast movers heavily in the early game because you'll see your teammates getting blown up and you want to support them. But a lot of times it's best to wait and just see how things develop. Once those battle lines start breaking down and units start running out of ammo, a flank overload like this one from Slaanesh can be devastating. And it has carved the heart out of the Empire, who frankly did not get all the support they needed from Rapunzel and her knights, who were engaged elsewhere. Still though, balance of power is barely going to move because the Beastmen and Khorne are mostly dead, and Boris, the Mortis Engine, Gotrek, and Belegar, pretty much the majority of the important SCMs for the good guys, are still around. Vlad is straight up beaten on infantry over here, although he does need to move back towards the middle, as he's doing now, realizing that beating up on Skaven slaves and clan rats won't make that big an impact. Fiends and Azazel have isolated that Mortis Engine, and if they can cut that down, that would be a huge swing in Chaos's favor. Looks like Boris and Rapunzel's got to be pretty careful with all that Slaaneshi cav circling around. Heartseekers, if they got a full surround off on any of these SCMs, would straight up butcher them. Mortis is able to escape because they got a bit of a cushion from that Necromancer on his corpse cart, some zombie summons occupying the Prince of Damnation's time. Fiends and Azazel don't really want to be fighting that, so if they're able to push through and get that Mortis Engine, that is ideally what they would like to see. Mortis has done a lot for the vampire counts thus far. It's been where it's needed pretty much every single time, and it's a big reason why Khorne just melted away in the middle after those initial engagements. But of course, whoever goes in first here is basically facing the wrath of 4 armies, 4 factions, so it's not surprising they're cut to pieces. Zombies, feeling the wrath of the Demon Blade, Azazel continuing into style, and he actually just got a sync kill on some of those undead troops, which did not work in Warhammer 2. You could not sync kill anything undead, which is a pretty nice touch in Warhammer 3. And it looks like the Soul Grinder causing some carnage in the rear, but with Gotrek, a Master Engineer, and a Flash Bomb slowing it down, realizes it's in a lot of peril, because Boris is almost back up to full. I think he might have gotten a regrowth sent his way from the Life Mage. That would be my guess. Invocation of the Heck, hitting the Mortis Engine. That should heal it up nicely. Rattling Guns exploding a corpse cart that was dueling a cultist. And now it looks like there's going to be a bit of a transition period, because all the forces are kind of resetting for the second wave of these engagements. Slaanesh is committing a lot to killing off that Mortis, and it looks like they might be able to just put it into crumbling territory. I don't think the Invocation of the Heck actually went through. Might have gotten canceled on Vlad if he recast it elsewhere, realizing the Mortis would die, or if he got knocked over. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Minotaurs with a huge hammer and anvil on the men-at-arms polearms, sandwiched between the remnants of the Khorne Chosen. It's a nightmare situation for any unit in Warhammer Fantasy. But the balance bar is slightly in favor of order. We'll see if that remains true as we move into the back half of this battle. Been a brutal, torrid, blood-soaked affair thus far. So many kills, littering the battlefield everywhere. The third brass orb for Ikit, and a Scorch hitting in from the flank. Gonna get rid of some of these Dwarf Warriors really nicely comboed, because the Vortex basically sucks everything in, prevents it from dodging, and then you hit it with the Wind spell. Rapunzel is still alive, Paladin is still alive, Life Mage is still alive, and Vlad and a lot of these single entities are moving over here to snipe out Torox the Brass Bull, who is escaping into the trees, but even though he's on his own turf, Boris Todbringer and the Griffin ensuring that the Brass Bull cannot escape. He actually has managed to squeegee his way through, but he does not have a ton of support out here. It'll be up to Slaanesh to ensure that the champion of Khorne survives, and sometimes Azazel isn't really feeling that. Chaos Gods are fickle though, and this time the Dark Prince does come to the aid of the Blood God. Acquiescence upgraded to lower the speed and melee defense of Boris, but he hit Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, and got a Von Hall's Danse Macabre from Vlad, which immediately counteracted all those debuffs and allowed him to take off back into the sky again. That was super good teamwork. They knew that a big duel was coming, and they know they need that Griffin moving into the late game. They popped everything on Boris to ensure he survived that fight, because that could have been really bad if he fell there and Azazel got some good attacks in on the flank. But the charge from Slaanesh might have given Torox just enough space to make good on his retreat. If he can rally with the forces of the Skaven, then they might be able to move back in and continue the carnage anew. Warp Lightning from Ikit Claw, pretty much going to miss everything, but we know that their artillery and gunpowder troops have made a big impact on this battle. A lot of the deaths you see right now can be attributed to their firepower. Big fight brewing in the center. Vlad von Karstein surrounded by a Soul Grinder and Azazel. Rapunzel just broke off. She was pretty much murdered by the Goon Squad, and Torox the Brass Bull did a lot in that fight as well, but he's starting to drop low, and he has no sources of healing, so he may not be around for too much longer if Boris decides to fight Torox mano-a-mano, especially if he can get some zombie summons in support, which is not what the Empire would typically like, right? Fighting side by side with a undead force, not ideal, but when Armageddon comes knocking and the end times are upon us, sometimes you gotta make some unsavory, unpalatable sacrifices, and thus far, I think the vampire counts have made a pretty big impact for the forces of Order, and are maybe the reason they're still in the game. But their Crypt Horrors are gone, their Mortis engine is gone, it crumbled out. Every single army on this battlefield right now completely in tatters, and the Rattling Guns unleashing with a huge firestorm towards Boris Todbringer. But when you're that far outside their fire arc, at the edge of their cone of fire, usually not going to do that much damage. It's when you get about halfway through or closer, that's when the Rattling Guns will pretty much delete you from full HP. Important engagement right here. We missed it, but the Razorgore Herd took the charge for all this remaining Slaaneshi Light Cav. They died, but for that sacrifice, the Crypt Horrors were destroyed, and those isolated monstrous infantry for the vampire counts are not going to be able to link up with the rest of the main army. Handful of Minotaurs remaining for Torox the Brass Bull, and the Blood Beast is still around, looking for a paladin to slay. Wisely, the Bretonnian should back up. Life Mage, Paladin, I believe the only two remaining troops for Bretonnia, and it is mostly going to come down to the single entities for both sides. Now, though those Rattling Guns could quickly dispense... Oh my god. This is straight out of The Last Samurai. Charge directly into Gatling Guns, and they will not survive. They were out of ammo anyway. They can't do much in melee. Might as well throw them in and try to shut down the Rattlings. A Demon Blade and Temptator for Azazel. All of his self-buffs going off in a fight with Boris, who is dropping low. Remember that Legbiter, his Rune Fang, will give him regen. So as long as he's able to pull away, should be able to get a bunch more health if he's not close to the cap, which I don't think he should be. He might be nearing it now, especially if there was a regrowth sent his way. Not entirely sure. Ikit Claw is dropping very low, and the Griffin might be able to finish him off, but double rattling attacks. Fire Ring of Thori hitting them in the flank and trying to zone them out. Torox and Azazel have set their sights on the Life Mage, and I'm not sure she's gonna get triple killed from the Legendary Lords. Oh my god. That was absolutely brutal, dude. They straight up posed like the Chaos Avengers there. They each had their own unique attack animation to hit her from one side or the other. Boris Todbringer and his Griffin deleted from the game by those Rattling Guns. And that is a big loss for the armies of Order. They really wanted that Griffin and its leadership penalties moving into the late stages of this battle. Master Engineer has been entirely isolated as well. Acquiescence, an amazing single target debuff. Very cheap, very spammable. Activates that Lore of Slaanesh passive quite often. But Master Engineer surrounded by Razorgore Herd and two of those powerful SCM duelists will not be able to survive for long. Torox and the remnants of his Minotaurs moving back into the fray, presumably after routing, I would guess. Vlad is in the center alongside Gotrek and Belagar Ironhammer with a corpse cart. And that weird, awkward alliance could potentially spell serious issues for the forces of Chaos as they look to put the final nail in the coffin of these hated rivals. They've pretty much run out of infantry. There's a few Chaff Marauders remaining, but I think that might be it when you're talking about the Chaos side. I don't know how many more zombie summons that corpse cart and the necromancer on top it will be able to send into the battlefield, but those could provide a really useful cushion for the single entities and prevent characters like Vlad from getting sniped out by these Rattling guns or sniped out by Azazel and the Soul Grinder, who is chasing after the Master Engineer. He just shattered, but I think he really wants that kill regardless, and he's gonna get it. Poor Dawi just got straight dunked on. Rather ignoble end after all the work he put in. He had some nice flash bombs and sniping. Probably not crazy damage value, but you bring him for the range support, and he certainly provided tons of that. Now, Razorgore Herd are not a unit you want to see in the late game because they have a lot of AP, but more importantly, they have a ton of mass. And when they get a full surround off, it really makes it easy for a character like Azazel to swoop in from above and start dueling you without you being able to hit back. Potentially a game-changing play right there from Aerocrastic to have kept those Razorgore Herd alive. They're not a very durable unit, but they are a very useful one in late game scenarios when you've got Torox and Azazel, two amazing duelists, beating down on a corpse cart, which has acquiescence sent its way, so it has no melee defense and no speed. Well, that is often going to be the result, and the single entities for Chaos are really putting in a ton of work here. Vlad, Belegar, Ironhammer, and Gotrek are still alive, and Gotrek's really important because he is bonus versus large, and he could definitely take the whooping to that Soul Grinder or to Torox. But they've run out of chaff, they've run out of bodies and meat shields, and that means their single entities are now exposed to the Rattling gun fire. And Gotrek was almost full HP, now down to half after a couple of volleys from those Gatling guns. Torox is still waiting on the wings, doesn't want to fully commit here, but Gotrek is isolated. Gotrek's Doom pop for the melee defense and the ward save. Really hard to kill him, but everything is diving in now. Soul Grinder is going after Vlad and straight up pushing him around, but the Von Karstein ring is activated. That's a 60% ward save on Vlad Von Karstein. He won't be dying anytime soon. Torox just routed off. Forces of Order are holding here, just barely, and the fact that Gotrek is unbreakable is extremely important. Him and Belegar are fighting back to back. It's super epic. Torox didn't rout, at least not yet. He's hanging on by a thread, so is everybody else. Rattling guns really shouldn't be firing from their max range. They should just move up and point blank into these SDMs. It would do way more damage. It would actually maybe delete some of these legendary lords. Torox is gone, and I think the Beastmen are going to route directly after him. So Belegar and Gotrek are going to be able to beat back the Cloven ones at the very least. Azazel is fighting Vlad in a 1v1. Acquiescence and Suppression kicking in here. Vlad has only 26 melee defense, back up to 50 now that it's worn off. And if it was just Azazel, maybe he'd have a chance. But the Demon Blade is kicking in to drop his leadership, which might send him into crumbling territory. And he has to deal with the half HP remaining on the Slaneshi Soul Grinder. So that is a lot of weapon strength and echolocation screams at point blank range being sent directly into his noggin. Very unpleasant to deal with. And I don't think Vlad has the power to kill both these guys by himself. He really needs to link up with Belegar and Gotrek, whose weird bugged regen is kicking in. You can see all that green flashing in the background, but Vlad has fallen. And with that, army losses kicks in. Now Gotrek is unbreakable, so he will not rout, but he has, with 542 HP, a 0% chance of beating what remains on the field. Azazel going in for the kill, and with one final strike from behind, or maybe two, Gotrek will finally meet his doom, and that is going to be the Subcommanders battle over. Finn, Ultimo, it's done. And a really good one at that. Super back and forth, a lot of cool moments for both sides, and ultimately it came down to only a bit of HP on a handful of single entities. Slaanesh, controlled by me, did a lot in this game. Just gonna say that. Azazel over 4,000 damage value, Heartseekers over 3,000, multiple chevrons earned, and the Cav, I think the play to not engage on the Bretonnian side, wait in reserve, and then swing all the way back over to the other side before they had a chance to really think about where they needed to commit their forces, really did make a big impact, because I just straight up gobbled up the Order back line, and that helped a lot. But I had a lot of help here too. Weka did a great job controlling the Rattling guns and the artillery. Aerocrastic did a ton with his Minotaurs and with Torox the Brass Bull, even though his Gorgon got deleted. And I'd say his Razorgore Herd might have even been more MVP than anything else. See the damage value on a lot of Ikit's troops. I think the biggest issue for the forces of order were the Bretonnian Knights and where they were committed. So I understand the desire to charge up the center, to get into those rattlings, to get into the avalanche mortars, shut down all the artillery, which was doing a ton of damage. But the issue is, if you enter the cone of fire of all that firepower, even if you have a lot of cav, you're gonna get suppressed, right? That's gonna be a 30% move slow, and then all the damage that comes with point blank rattling gun volleys. And so losing the cav like that really hurt and made it a little bit easier for Slaanesh to move into the back line and start gobbling up all the handguns and artillery on that side. The frontliners for both sides got destroyed. Not surprising there. If you have a lot of infantry, you're gonna be the fodder. You're gonna be the thing that gets exploded by the artillery. But someone needs to do it. And in this instance, he who controls the cav controls the glory. And if they use it well, they can get a lot of kills and damage value preying on the troops once battle lines start breaking down.